If you've never met Kirsty in person, I'm sure you all know her amazing Microsoft 365 wheel that you can see behind
Brilliant.
Kirsty. And Kirsty not only invented this wheel for all of us, but she's also regularly updating it, which is quite a big task, I would say, with an evergreen Microsoft 365 environment. So Kirsty is really amazing. She is a true Microsoft 365 ninja. She has been awarded Microsoft MVP status 7 times. And honestly, there is only a handful of people around the world who've been given this award 7 times. It's quite a huge thing. She's a founder of the 2 Australian Microsoft 365 adoption user groups, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne. She regularly speaks at different conferences, and I'm sure you've heard her speaking at the Digital Workplace Conference uh, in New Zealand as well. She sometimes visits us here as well. And she's a real adoption guru when it comes to Microsoft 365. So today, Kirsty is going to talk to us about a successful award-winning case study and all the learnings around a Change Champions program. Over to you, Kirsty. And in terms of questions, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and at the end of the session, Kirsty will cover them all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Irina. It's interesting in terms of what do people say to introduce me? It's like I don't want to talk about me. It's always nicer when someone else talks about me. But I'm here to talk about a Change Champions program, but it was even bigger than that. The Change Champions and what they did as part of a much bigger program to try and shake it up. I am actually now got 3 user groups. We've just this year started the Brisbane user group as well. In terms of being hybrid, you will actually find, lots of information online. I have a YouTube channel. It's called M365 Adoption. My Wheel of Fortune, I've got information in here if you want to get a copy of it. It is on its 43rd iteration over 9 years. 43, it's hard to believe it's actually that many, but evergreen, it's always constantly changing. I've just created the Microsoft 365 Adoption Library this year. There's 1 page up. It's all Microsoft 365 Adoption for Copilot. There's about 60 more to go. So we'll see how we go over time. I've only just released this. It'll be coming out for you. But feel free to join. I am a change practitioner and I'm also a certified online learning facilitator. So this program, it was actually award-winning. So it won both the Chief Executive Award, it was a government department, as well as the Attorney General Award. So it was a fabulous program that was actually run out for the modern workplace. It was called the WOW. This is my wheel. If you want to get a copy of it, it is available online for anyone to be able to grab at any point. If it's a bit.ly link, it's really important that you actually do uppercases and lowercases and things like that, the joys of it. But feel free to scan it. This presentation will be provided to you after the session as well to be able to support you learning. As stated, if you have any questions, to throw them into chat. I'll try and answer them along the way. If not, I will come back around at the end and also answer, or if you've got something a bit more complex, then feel free to raise your hand and you can ask questions verbally. So one of the things that I actually did when I got brought into a particular program where they were really struggling, the program was actually about, rolling out some new Windows devices with lots of new information going on. They had a SharePoint program. They had things turned off. It was all a bit of a mess. They did have change champions that had already been there as part of rolling out sort of OneDrive, for example, OneDrive and Teams. That people weren't really overly engaged. They were coming along to the meetings. They were very passive in the way they were working. And when I came into the program and I was having a bit of a chat and talking with help desk and across the board, and there was approximately sort of 420 up down to 440 back and forwards in terms of the program. It was like, okay, well, who are the champs that are actually out there and how actively engaged are they? So the first thing I did when I walked in was I wanted to survey my champs. And part of that surveying the champs was finding out who they were, what their skill sets were, because I had done a meeting with them, giving them kind of what my expectations were. And they go, oh, yeah, we know this. Oh, yeah, we know that. But when it came down to it, we started to go through the survey. I did the whole, well, who are you? Do you have a nickname? Because what I wanted to do was I actually wanted to create a SharePoint profile of all of the champs so that the rest of the business actually knew who they were, because that was half the challenge. If they don't know who they are, they don't know who to go to. If all they're doing is supporting their team and that's it, that wasn't what I wanted as an outcome from my champs, especially when we had big programs that were rolling out over the space of a year. Okay, so I went, how comfortable are you? We had a 7.32 rating in terms of comfortability. And I'm like going, okay, we're going to test this over time. They say they're comfortable, but they really weren't. There was a few that were, but they're not. And it's like, put in order your favorite products. So, dragging it up and down and where were they at? And, it's funny, a few people had said Microsoft Forms, but Forms wasn't even turned on inside the business. And when I went into it, it was like they actually didn't know. There was one person only out of the whole team. Now, when I first started, there was around about, or I would say about 55 champs for a business that was sort of 430 odd strong. And I'm like going, that's quite a lot of champs. We technically don't need that many champs. When you look at the ratio of what you need to champs, you kind of go, okay, I want people that are true evangelists. So I then started going a little further. What do you use each week? And it's like, okay, where they kind of went from to, and I went, where do I need to educate them effectively? Because they needed to have some skills, and how often do they actually work in it? And of course, the OneDrive SharePoint team spending plenty of time. And Teams was really just about chat and meetings. It wasn't about anything else. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. And then it was like, well, what do you want to learn more about? And it's like, these are the topics that they then wanted to learn about. So right up the top was when you start to look at where they really wanted to, when they were quite unfamiliar with, the likes of Planner and Forms and To Do. It's like, okay, we've got stuff that they don't know or haven't dealt with at all. So from there, when we started to dive into a little bit more, I've got all these champs and they're out there supposedly helping the business as part of the rollout. Now, they'd had teams for about 3 years, so they'd had it for some time. And, they had it. And of course, it was that kicking off and through COVID, being in a pandemic, everyone was kind of forced to use it without a massive amount of change behind it as a program. So I went to the help desk and I sort of went, okay, where are all your problems? What are the challenges that you've actually got across the business? And who are the noisy champs? Are they really struggling? Are they helping others? Are they really unsure? Or are they diving a little bit deeper? So I started getting some profile from the help desk as well. So I ran a regular meeting with the help desk. At first it was every week, and then it dropped down to fortnightly. And it stayed fortnightly over the space of the whole 1 year in terms of understanding the modern workplace and what that actually, in terms of working with a Working Wonders program. Now, I then sort of went, okay, if I actually had to prioritize and make sure that I was lifting skill sets across the business, what are the things that you get the most amount of calls about? And it was like document sharing was way up there. People really struggled with it. They were having problems with links. And it's like, okay, I'm here to do a, Windows device rollout. Everything was changing. Their store was changing. They didn't have to do VPN in anymore, all sorts of things as a program. But it gave me a really good opportunity to go, okay, what does a modern workplace look like in terms of lifting all the skill sets and not just here's your new device and how do you actually use it? So it was like we had lots of technology and little things that we were pushing out over time. So it's like we dive in, we had a little bit of a look through, what could we do and where were we having some challenges? So from there, I went in and I started to have a look at, what were people doing in the back end in terms of behaviors? Because I sort of went, sharing is a major problem. And I was like, okay. And they were just attaching. It was all attachments and things were getting broken and they were having problems with linking to files. And so it was like people just weren't doing it as a behavior. So they weren't getting a real return on their investment in terms of modern workplace. So when we started to look at that attach of physical files, it's like, wow, okay, there's certainly plenty of files going out, but not necessarily in a really good way. And then when it came to behavior communications, chat was going off and ballistic. And it often is inside a business because they don't understand the difference between the chat and the channel and why to actually use one or the other. They didn't understand that a chat is really noisy and you'll get a notification for everything. And in the back end, the architecture was OneDrive. So if they leave, so does all of the documents and the links. They didn't understand that. They also weren't doing a lot around the at mentioning to be able to help out and knowing the terms of the responses and kind of what that looked like. And they didn't have Viva Engage on at this point in the conversation. So I started looking in and diving in and getting some baseline measurements. So from there, I had my survey, it had gone out. I started building things like I wanted a team that they could work in. I wanted a SharePoint site that they could actually go. It was a pack attached to the team. And it was like, what does the rest of the business need to also be able to learn? So we started looking at building the community. So their team, I had to have a safe space for them to be able to have a conversation. We had, eventually we had one that was external for the business, and then, that wasn't the champs, but then it was inside the champs. And inside that champs corner, we had very simple things like the general standard announcement, the champs corner, where I would go in and I'd be asking questions and pushing out, this is what was going on and what do I want, and challenges. And then there was the 101 corner where they went to ask each other questions, where they could answer each other. So we had these simple channels. We didn't need to boil the ocean in regards to it, but that champs corner could be all sorts of different kind of conversations. Now in the tabs, what we actually had was, and I built out as part of those two, the general channel was where we actually had the champs management platform for a bit of gamification, a session registry of all of the sessions, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, their profile form. Now, with the profile form and them getting active engaged, if I found out after a period of time there wasn't any engagement, we'll dive in. What actually happened to them? So we filled out the profile form. And then in the champs corner was where they went to for all of their knowledge base. So it was, where are things like, there are lots of learning, like Simulive type demos and like e-learning type demos that Microsoft provide that they could go to do their own training and education, let alone my YouTube channel, the Microsoft Learning Space. There's the Microsoft Champion calls that they could actually get involved in as well. I had a notebook that was all notes and things off our meetings. There was the calendar of things that we had coming up, and our modern workplace site, the MoWo site, that was for public and news and what was happening across the business that I created. And I'm going to show you some of that. Now, for me to be a trusted advisor, they needed to get to know me, because I came in and, I was doing around about 3.5 days a week over the space of a year with them. And I needed to be fast becoming someone that they felt they could talk to reach out, to know the knowledge. So every single meeting that we did, and we went from a fairly regular meeting to a cadence that could slow down, and then when we were rolling out, speed back up again. But we found that the more regularly I engaged with them, the more they turned up and the more they got involved. So what we had was, I would do at the beginning of every single session. And if you come to any of my user groups, for example, because I run the adoption user groups for Australia, it's, well, what have I been up to? I would talk about my grandson. I do cake decorating. I'm a hardcore cake decorator, and, I'm going to the International Cake Show, and I've got stuff in the collaboration going on. And when I'm trying to shut my head down from being online and moderating and answering community questions, in whether it be video or through forums or presenting, or outside of my day job of running a business, outside of running a user group, I think I'm doing too much. I do jigsaw puzzles to shut my head down. So I'd always talk to them about what have I done, or if I'm traveling, or, I'm off to a particular conference, and I put information up. Now, what I did was each fortnight I was running. At first, it was kind of a weekly. We had these different sessions. We had a community catch-up, and then we had program management type catch-ups. But in the community catch-up, I would go, okay, remember I'd surveyed what were the topics that you feel you know or don't know. I then started building out a regular training program that was very specific for them. So it wasn't just, general touch points for the whole of the business. It was things that were a little bit more in the deep dive so that they understood and they got to understand not just where to click the feature, but what was the benefits, the aha moments, the why, because I want them to be able to articulate that back to the business. Well, why would you do it that way? Okay, so I took them on this whole journey. So the session registry was a Microsoft list, and on that list, we actually, I was like, these are the topics, these are the sessions. What was I talking about? What products is it? So it was a pick and choose of the products I could do, a link to the recording, a link to the presentation. So these were all kind of in there, and any comments or other information was needed was all in this session registry. Now, what would happen was, because I was running this regular cadence of meetings and updates, I could see who was coming and not coming. I could see who filled out the profile form and who didn't fill out the profile form. I could start to see who was engaging in my community and actually talking and asking questions and getting involved. And if I could see they weren't really engaging or they weren't around, and remember there was like close to nearly 60 odd people, I just started kicking them out. Literally kicked them all out. And I brought it down to about 30 people. And do you know what? I had 2 people out of the 30 that I bounced come back to me and go, I know I'm a bit of a stalker. I do watch the recordings. I don't really talk too much, but I'm really enjoying it. And I am watching them and I am engaged. And I don't, because I kind of went, this is what's going on, guys. Bang, gone. Only 2 noticed. So I had a chat that went, we don't have access. And I just went, well, this is why. And they came back in. I was more than happy to bring them back in, but there were conditions. So when it came to bringing someone on in a champs program, I was very strict around what that looked like. I would actually speak to both them and their senior leader and go, this is the expectations about being a change champion. It would be they have to give up this much time every single week to be able to engage and be part of a learning community, because we were a learning community. I needed their senior management, permission. It wasn't just we want someone from our team to be a change champion, and they weren't really happy about being a change champion. And a change champion is not about someone that's voluntold. It's like, well, we want you to go out and get the knowledge because you've got the most amount of time. It's like, well, no, I want true evangelists. So I had this agreement with senior leadership because I just went as well in terms of their manager. I went, if they're coming in and I'm now halfway through the program, I've already run a ton of education pieces. They now need to get up to speed on all of this content because I'm not going back and individually training each one of them. So feel free to buddy up with another champ if you wish to and be able to get some learning off the champs community. But this is the time commitment. They got around about 10 hours worth of learning. It was actually sort of 7 to 8 really, but there are other things they might want to get involved or engaged on. And I got the agreement from the senior leadership and from them and the expectation. Now, if they've completed and they've come to the meetings and they've come to all of these components, they then went into the champs management platform, and there was actually a certain amount of points that they got for doing any of this. So they registered the points and they registered them for, asking questions, and they started to build out the points around it. Okay. So one of the components that I really taught them as part of the program was to have a collaboration contract with their team. And not sure if you've actually seen it, but, Sue Hanley and Lorian Strand came up back in 2018, I think it was a while ago, the collaboration contract. That it's not just about you knowing the knowledge, it's about you and your team coming together and working in a very specific way. Because you've got half of the team working in old ways and half working in new ways. It's going to fall over, and then it's going to make it much harder because you're putting information in all of the spaces. So I help them to understand the collaboration contract and to start working with their teams on it. Okay. Now, what I found was, it's like, okay, I ran the training, but at the end of each training, so every single week that I ran those training, there was a challenge at the end of it. It was, okay, I've now talked to you about working out loud in channels, for example. So now you have a challenge, and that challenge is I want you to do all internal communications through Teams only, whether it be, chat or channels. If you are going to be, using emails, I want you to do at mentioning and try to include a few other behaviors. But the main thing I really wanted was I wanted them to use Teams and start at mentioning, for example. And then it went on. So each week they got a challenge at the end of the training, of which I then measured against. And I also wanted them to come back to me, and they got points for it as well, with use cases and scenarios around what they did. So I would put up in the channel, I would go, here's your champion training challenge. This week I want you to do this. Remember, ask any questions, make sure you put it into the right channel. And I want you to come back and show me as well, what did you actually do as well? How did you do it? What was the response with your team? And if you can't put the scenario of whatever it is, look at screenshots as proof, because I needed the proof as well, not just, I chatted. If they couldn't put the proof in terms of the conversation, they could do it with me privately if they really needed to. But it would always help if they put it into the champs public space, because then other people would learn off them on top of it. Okay. Now, what we actually saw in the space of 6 months, now this is actually before I've run the big program for the rest of the business, by the way. So I haven't even hit out on the big program yet. But in the space of the 6 months of getting them geared up and ready, we actually grew by 539% with them going out on the challenges and working and coming back, and a bit of an award system. Now, that was a significant jump. And when I first joined the business, because remember they had it for 3 years, by the way. So I started doing what are the baseline measurement. And I went in there and I went, okay, I've been here 1 month and I had done 40 channel messages, and I had got to the point where I started to educate my own project team of working out loud in something like a channel and using this technology correctly. What does a smarter meeting actually look like? What does working out loud? What does good document collaboration? And started doing it with my own and a couple of other teams. And within 1 month, with my 40 channels, I was the largest user of Microsoft Teams over the 3 years that it had been rolled out, which was saying something. It's like, okay, they really don't know how to use channels or why to use channels. Okay. So what I then also did was, as part of that community corner, I would always go in, I'd ask for feedback. I'd always do a bit of a refresh, and I always did continuing education as well. So, I would remind them that we'd have a catch up that was actually coming up. If there was things going on, I would also, as part of my regular cadence, would go, well, what's new to Microsoft 365? What are the things that are actually coming? Because this is an evergreen environment. So at least if they knew something was coming or it had just been rolled out, they could then go, oh, did you know, to their own team to force on further education. And so that came in handy when we get further to the public. Okay, so we'll come back around to the public. I also had an acknowledgement program. That acknowledgement program was, one, praising my champs. So at the end of every week, I would go and say, well, who was exhibiting the behaviors that I really like to see across the business as champs? I did it both in the channel, and then what I would do is once a month, I'd also would put it out to the rest of the business on our intranet site that we actually built, to say who was my champ of the month, of which they'd actually get acknowledgement from the chief executive and from the IT manager and some of the project team and HR, where they would actually get acknowledged as a change champ. Because it was government, we couldn't actually do financial acknowledgement, but there are so many other ways that you can actually give back to a community that's not financial. And helping them to say, you can put this on your resume as well, because don't forget, a champs is leading a business forward. They're leaders. So I wanted them to make sure that they had stuff that they could actually say if they were going for another job internally or externally, put it on their resume. So I would congratulate them, whether it be one or it would be multiple people. And, I do a bit of kudos, and then I'd also put it in the meeting as well, whenever we had our meetings, but I'd put it out on the channel. And that could be for a variety of things. It might be the case study that they put up. It might be the amount of questions that they were actually asking. It was all sorts of reasons. Now, what I did towards the end of the program, I went, okay, I downloaded all the attendance report, because remember, I was keeping an eye out on them. And if they weren't actually engaged, I'd kick them out. And they knew it too. And I just went, if you're not in, I'm not giving you all my time and attention if you're not going to give me your time and attention. So they knew it was reciprocal. It was always done with, very friendly attitude. And it was just like, if you don't want to be part of the program or you find it's too much, then please feel free to drop out. Is there someone else that wanted to be in? And then I would interview them and then speak with senior leadership because I'd want to ask, why do you want to be a champ? So the award for the most attended sessions, so I would then go, now it wasn't even just did you attend the most. So I went, wow, Gail turned up for 41 of the 44 sessions, for example. It's like, woo, you actually came. That was a lot. Now look at this. This is a lot of sessions that I was running over a period of time. But she turned up to them. But I didn't just do that. I went, who stayed the longest? Because she might have turned up. But what if she dropped off after 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, for example? You can turn up and then not stay. So it was actually Lachlan who came for a total of 33 hours all up. 30, like nearly a half. Okay. So 33 hours was a significant amount of time and attention. Now, Lachlan was also on the help desk. He was a change champion and he then started in a job on the help desk. So he started as a champ and moved over because he was loving what he was doing. So he went into more the end user productivity help desk type stuff. So he made a bit of a shift inside the business. It was really interesting, the shift over in his job with becoming a champ and really getting to know the tech. And he had a bit of a technical background as well, which helped. Now, the top champion in the platform. So this is then the person that's going in and filling in all of their data and the things that they were doing right across everything, not just turning up to the meetings or staying the longest. It was helping out in the community and asking questions. And okay, so it went that little bit further. So on the Champs Management platform, and if you haven't actually seen it, it's free. You can actually roll it out. It sits in a SharePoint site and you can plug it into your Microsoft Teams, and in there you can put in challenges, and those challenges have got both learning that Microsoft provide as well as the ability to be able to do kind of ranking in points. And they put in all of their activities, and I would then state, well, how many points do you get for a particular activity that you actually did? And certain ones, of course, were ranking much higher than others, in depending on what you actually wanted to do. And I'll show you some of that in just a second. So they would go in and fill it out. Now, a fellow by the name of Scott did a fabulous job. So Scott, in the end, was doing an amazing job. Scott was out there doing so much stuff. Fabulous. Now, Nazrin was fascinating because she was a bubbly personality, and she was also in the comms team, and her influence was really strong. Now, Scott was in the digital team and he had a really strong influence as well. But some of the others, although they weren't in those type of roles, they were very heavily embedded in the business and some of the processes. So we started to see a real shift in some of the processes and the cleaning up of processes in the business. So in terms of some of the ranking, you can see some of the stuff. If you posted a question, you can see they actually got quite a lot of points when they posted a question. And the reason I did that was because it actually gave them, it's a vulnerable thing to actually ask a question, okay? Because if you're going to be vulnerable, it makes a huge difference in terms of knowledge, because I'm saying this is your safe space and it is okay to ask a question, okay? To be able to talk to your community. And that was leading to a sense of trust. It's like we trust that anything that we say, it's okay. So I had certain things that it was there was some real value around doing that. Teaching someone else, because it wasn't just about learning. Learning is great. Anyone can actually learn and pull the information, but I wanted you to go out and I actually want you to teach someone. So that was a much higher point as well, because I want you to pass the knowledge on. So if you're teaching someone on the team, tell me. Okay, so they're the sorts of things. Now, let's look at we then started rolling out to the business. So this was a lot of this stuff was all kind of rolling out. The awards was more post rolling out, but this is some of the rollout stuff. Now, I had created a marketing program. And as an adoption consultant, I would advise the business. I'd bring together comms, I'd bring together the champs, I'd bring together my change management, and they were there to just give advice. Once a week they'd come and give advice, but I was embedded as the adoption consultant. It's a little different than being a change manager, because I'm doing full end to end. I'm also doing the training, I'm doing all the analysis, I'm building out big comms programs. I said, I want to have, and this is even Gov, I want to have a logo, I want to have a particular color that's actually in. I want our site to look like that. I want our comms, I want everything, no matter where they go, whether it's a pilot poster that went up on my Change Champions, because they were heavily engaged in the pilot program, and saying, I'm a champ, come and talk to me, basically, as part of the pilot. So, we did that and we put it out there. We had, checklists on day one. We said our floor walkers, our champs were part of our floor walkers. They were a fabulous support, because there's only so many of us in the help desk, and there was only so many. And because we're rolling out devices, we literally had to go, around Australia to actually, roll this out right around Australia, because it's federal government. So we're going everywhere, rolling it out. Now, the website that we had a whole huge training resources. We had all the key resources across the business. And I had a bit of a theme, because they needed to, you'll see here, with a device, they had to turn up. They had to turn up on the day. They had to bring their device. They had to tick off a checklist. Okay. And then they had to also attend the training. And the training was done on the day in the rollout of the device. Now, I could have just done a really quick, for example, I could have done a really simple, quick, this is 20 to 30 minutes of your new device and Windows and where you go to the store and how you get in now and what it'll look like. And I went, no, I got the buy-in for the business that we actually ran a 2-hour training session 3 times a day, of which the whole business was then running through. They decided they were going to make it compulsory, because we were swapping everything out in so many ways. What we managed to do was, here's your new device. You need to know how to get in. You need to know how to be able to work on it. We were floor walking first. So we floor walked on the morning, we rolled it out, and then they chose a particular training session that day. So each day was a certain amount of people, and we rolled them through. So we also had the change champion platform, and the change champion platform, and we had a whole page on our website, that, on our internet site, I should say, that was to know who and what was going on, all of the news. But this is also a page on all of your champs, who they are, their profile, what do they do, okay, plus all the awards. And then they had their own platform as well. So this tagline went right throughout it. Now, in terms of the training results, we ended up recording and converting over and modularized one of the training we had recorded and did some training, and we turned it into e-learning. So if they couldn't come, then they could, for whatever reason, there was a lot of reasons why they might not be able to be there in person. They were sick, or was away for the week, or on long service leave. But what we did was we took that recording, put it online, and we ended up running about 90 hours worth of training. And it was about 12 working days. We had 415 people trained. We had 93% attendance rate, which is the highest they had ever had. Whether it was mandatory or not training, they had never had that many people actually come along to the training, because we did just-in-time learning, okay? Now, I also had, and across all of the business, there were surface hubs. There were 21, there wasn't 21 at all of the locations. There was a ton of surface hubs, but I ran 21 surface hub training, because they weren't even using them. They were sitting there as a pretty screen. And it's like, well, that's really sad, because they were expensive. So I took the opportunity to run morning tea and lunchtime sessions. 93% felt it was beneficial. 95% was satisfied. 80% said they could continue to do this and drive it out into learning, which is phenomenally high off the back of training. 94% satisfaction. Okay. So when you look at that, that was really, really high in terms of the response rate around these training results. Now, we also ran, as part of that, I said, we need to have a desk wherever we go where they can just walk up and they feel like that they're getting a response immediately from people that are sitting at a table to fix stuff along the way for the week that we might actually be on location. So they felt supported as part of this. Okay. the quotes from the project that it was seamless, that it was a real credit, amazing, eye opener. Because I was saying in the session, in the 2 hours, in what we were actually doing, it was about the art of the possible. I wasn't there to get them to click through every single feature. We would have been there for days. I wanted them to know this is the art of the possible. And off the back of it, I'm going to run some short, sharp training sessions for you on each of the topics to dive in a little bit further. So I was backing it up, saying, don't worry if you didn't get it now, we're going to come back around to it. And I'll show you what we did in terms of that ongoing support. We had a lot of the smoothest I've been, in organizations. I've been working for 42 years. Here had, was going on. Smoothest tech change rollout I have ever seen. Now, things were going wrong all over the place, by the way. But if you have the right change program and you're adjusting things as quickly as possible. Like a guide that we had done on one, it was like, okay, something's changed. It was a real problem. We need to change the process just a little to try and make it seem like it's seamless, even though it may not be seamless. If we give them an alternative way to do this, they'll think it's seamless. Now, the other thing was, because we had a checklist on the day, and we found that a lot of people were even getting their checklists and putting it into their tray and then just logging on. And it's like, well, you're supposed to do the 2-page checklist to make sure that you're logging in, or how to do it. Checklist and a guide. So there was the checklist and the guide together. And people just put them aside and off they went. And of course, they're going to hit problems. So the champs became the real value here. So that myself and project manager and the service desk and the champs were just trawling through the business and making sure that they pulled out and used that guide, or they would hit all these problems, which would then chew up the bandwidth of the business. Now, what we found off the back of it was we had a help desk support line that the calls started reducing around all of the productivity stuff. And because we were supporting them, they were also weren't getting hammered, absolutely hammered as part of a rollout. And it wasn't that it was quiet. People were still calling, but the questions started to shift and change in terms of the things that they were asking about. They were truly getting tech issues, not productivity issues. Quite different. Okay. So we started to shift the nature of those service desk calls. Plus, the service desk or the help desk or whatever it is that you call, found that they weren't feeling as completely overwhelmed all the time, and they were getting a lot more job satisfaction. So we had a lot happening across the business. So now this organizational support when it came to the champs. So they were out there, they were trawling around. They had a lanyard that they were actually wearing. So the whole project, they got a lanyard, and we were able to actually do that. And they had some little bits and pieces that they had the rest of the business didn't actually have as something kind of on their desk to support them. So the lanyard was one of them to be recognized as a champ when they were walking around. And the rest of the business knew, as part of the education, we had educated senior leaders beforehand. We had facilities all educated and ready to go. We had managers. We had comms that were going out to the managers. There's all sorts of things that were going on in the background. Then what we did as part of the program, and we talked to them and go, look, we may not always be there. The champs may not always be there, but we created a public team because they weren't using Viva Engage, so I couldn't use that public space. So we used a Microsoft Teams. And because I was teaching them how to use Teams as part of the training, it was come in, say hi. If you have an idea or something that you actually think was really fabulous, put in ideas on how to. Now, what I also did was I got our champs to go, I want you to go in to, actually we'll start. I want you to go in and say hi and who you are, what are your specialties, because that was something that I also talked about. What did they do in the business, the projects that they've been on, where do they love and spend their time, what were their hobbies, did they have any animals or pets, let alone their own names. So there was this whole profile cards, okay? And in the ideas and how to, so they went in and started introducing themselves when we went around. And then in the ideas, because I was doing training, I wanted them to tell people, what did you do? How did you do it? What did you love? What's new that's come out that you think is fabulous on ideas of how to? There was the training corner, which is where we were pushing out further training. They could come to any particular announcements as to what was actually going on. If we were running, bigger public sessions, or, we had all these different ways that we were pushing things out. And then they could also come in and ask questions. How do I? And we had the help desk involved in there as well. So we started to shift the nature of the phone calls to be able to put things in here. And if the community as a whole, the whole of the business, so we were becoming a learning organization. We wanted to be a learning business, to learn from each other, because we've all got such fabulous knowledge. And we don't want to let that go along the way. Okay. So there was then that, well, how do I? And they could ask questions in there. Now, sometimes, yes, they were technical, but what we would actually do was people would start to know as well. They go, oh, I asked the help desk this just recently. It's actually quite simple. So the organization were even answering the help desk type questions. And we started to see a bit of a flip as to what that looked like. So in the how do I, and we started to then work out loud in the channel and some of the success. Things like I've been receiving the sign-in window when opening files from SharePoint. I started and I'm retesting and in the install, I've entered my email address, but it doesn't do anything and it keeps actually asking me. And, someone else actually answered. This is not the help desk. And this was something that would ordinarily have gone straight to the help desk. Pick up the phone. And this was one of the just the community people actually solving the problem. And it's like, try going in, set to the manual sync. Same thing happened to a couple of colleagues yesterday. Seemed to work after that. Thanks, worked perfectly. Done, fixed. And look at how quickly, 10:52, by 10:04 it was answered. By 10:16 he was done. Okay. People were actively answering. Now, half the time, if you've ever sat on a help desk call line, half the time you might sit there for 30 minutes even just waiting for the poor overloaded, support or service desk to answer a call. The fact that this was actually done so quickly through the community was just amazing to actually see, to solve business problems. Okay. Now, the public channel analytics, this was over 90 days, but really it was around about, this was pretty quickly done over a period of time. And you can actually see that in that public channel, there was 77 posts, of which lots of people are coming in and then replying, and plenty of thumbs up, love it, okay? Or it was help and how do we? So it really started to get in there. Look, we had out of the 30 odd people, we had 354 people physically in those channels, which is, amazing to have them come in and engage. Now, there was a whole area of the business that was the call center that was really not overly engaged or didn't necessarily really need to be in here. They had very much their own systems and quite a bit going on. So we could kind of shear off nearly even a quarter of the business in some respects, maybe not that high, maybe a sixth of the business, just in terms of the help desk. But we found that, in terms of the people that were in there, and there were actually change champions on the contact center, and we did have people coming in, but not as many as what we had across the rest of the business. Okay. Now, we had our public team, of course, so I needed to recognize, well, who was our best helper? Okay, in that MoWo public team, because it was like answering questions and helping out and putting information in, some cool things that you could actually do. So if someone was asking for assistance, it was like, champs, I need you to go in and keep an eye out on it. Turn your notifications on to be able to help and support. Okay. And I made the help desk do the same, and support desk. And if someone hadn't answered within a particular time, we had a bit of I suppose, how long before they had received an answer. I wanted to try and make sure that we were answering quite quickly, so we kept an eye out on it. So my chams, and it ended up being Lachlan. Now, Lachlan was both that change champion, remember, and he moved over into the service desk, and he ended up being our number one responder. And he just loved what he was doing and was just all over it. And he was learning as well as part of this as well. Because, if people ask a question, the great thing is, if you answer it, and I always taught my champs, you may not always know, but there's some amazing information out there that you can actually go and find. Now, when I had done the training, I did a survey as part of the training. It was like, well, as part of the next steps, because I promised them I would do some more training once we got out, because it was the art of the possible, not how to click and do everything. It was like, well, what is it that you really want to know more about? So, SharePoint was like way up there, and lists they were fascinated with because I hadn't actually seen it before. Although it was in SharePoint, it's been around in SharePoint for a really, really long time. It was like, oh, that sounds good. OneNote, also been around for a long time, but so many people weren't using it for note taking, and Forms was a fairly new product. Now, Forms, I had actually run a training session because we rolled it out completely as part of the program, and I had done a session already on it, but they wanted it again. So sure, let's have a look at it. So now I ran 2 times a week for 4 weeks. So I did 1 month program, of which they were 15-minute microbite sessions. So we call them the M365 microbites. And as part of that, these were the topics that we actually then pushed out in terms of getting to know. And out of those sessions, out of 430 people, the average was 112 people. Now, what I did was, remember the channel that I did around training? I pushed out all of those sessions into the training channel. I didn't do meeting invites from my calendar. It all went into the channel. So what would happen was when it hits the channel, everyone got the notification because it was automatically dropping into people's calendars because it was in the channel. And remember, there are 354 people in the team. So it was dropping into calendars automatically. So when that kicked off, if they were available, they jumped in. To have 112 people turn up on average over those 4 weeks, 2 sessions a week for 4 weeks, that is a phenomenal response to everyday type productivity training. So from there, off the back of that training, I was doing the whole show me cases of what you're actually doing. Because remember, it was like that ideas. So for example, someone went out, they loved Microsoft Lists. Now, this was actually for the contact center. And we had a bit of a chat and a talk because they went, we like lists, so they could reach out to me and have a conversation. And I went, well, what are the different ways that you could potentially do a acknowledgement for your contact center? And we came up with Microsoft Lists that they put a bit of a kudos board, and they could actually have, well, what were the categories? And at the end of it, it was like who actually created it, who thought they'd done something really, fabulous, and why, because they're all sitting beside each other and they can hear each other. They also would have, some really full-on scenarios in this call center, like really hard and harsh stuff actually happening for people out in the community that they were a support for. They were effectively had become a lot of counselors in a lot of respect. So what they did was they acknowledged that sometimes people had a really bad day, but how they managed to handle it under a lot of pressure and stay really calm. So these then went up on the boards, and as part of those boards, once a month, the senior leadership could actually see, and they could organize it. Of course, because it was a list, they could organize it based on people. So I could change it around on the board and then start to see, well, who is getting the most praise and what did that actually look like over the space of, however many weeks or months or years, to be able to then start doing an award system in their own teams as part of working out loud in a team in channel lists. Okay. Now, a survey of then where did they go? And what I particularly loved was because we had promoted, this is where you go to get information. This is where you go. This is where you go. This is where you go. Number one was our modern workplace site. This is where all the knowledge and the training, and it was in a really good structure in terms of being able to help it. They then came to info share sessions. So these were like the 15-minute bites, or it was an online 1 hour training session that I might have run on Microsoft Forms. So these were all the overarching and larger sessions that were run over a period of time. Any of the virtual sessions that we actually might have done. So there was different types of virtual sessions with the modern team around projects and what we were doing. Then it was all the in-person sessions in terms of because we were doing the art of the possible, not necessarily the click, click, click sometimes. The how-tos, the assistants, look at where service desk is now gone. Like it was always like right up there. But now it was dropping right down. And going out to external Microsoft content and things like that. Now, the emails that were coming through, because we had so many ways to connect to them, and I would go where they were. So I would actually go to the team if they were having a meeting, and I would talk to the actual team, like the bigger groups of, it might be 30 or 40. I would actually physically go to where they were and not always expect them to come to me in its overarching session as well. In the final analysis, so at the very end of the project, over 180 days, this was an amazing response in working out loud in channels to speed up the business. So the digital workplace, the digital team, so it was a digital team. Remember, Scott was none of the number ones. There were 4 people in that team. So if anyone says to me, oh, we haven't got very many, so we don't use channels very much, I beg to differ. There were 4 people in this team, and they were the largest users of channels. They had stopped completely trying to do emails internally. The amount of messages per person was 358. Okay, that's the average, was 358 per person, which are just a fabulous. And then it was our project team working together. Then it was going out to the modern workplace. So this was the one that I had actually created for the public to come in. And this was in a really short period of time, by the way. So it was only over the 180 days, but this one was probably even less in terms of time. Then it went into strategy. Now, this particular person became a real mentor and was doing some amazing stuff, and I did a story on her as well. So I would talk about different case studies across the business and the stories. But what I particularly loved was that the chief executive was driving forward and really using his team and using it well for the business. So it was senior leadership was also really driving a lot of these programs in new ways of working. So the fact that they're up there and they're in that top 5, fabulous work. Now, after 1 year, so don't forget, this is right from the very beginning to right to the very end, we managed to get people finally using their SharePoint site and then collaborating in online files. Remember, they were actually not sending links. They were sending attachments around, and they weren't collaborating very well. So to get to this point was amazing. And 77%, don't forget, you've got a whole contact center that aren't doing any online collaboration at all. Like, they're not collaborating on documents, they're answering phones. So that's pretty much the business. Now, people using Teams to communicate, we had, an increase of 18%, and then 30% of the call center was, with limited risks. They were kind of quite a big percentage of the business. Now, getting to 40%, it was still low, but we were still really early in the usage of channels for the whole of the business. So the fact that in a really short period of time, we had a big jump, and it ended up being 434% increase ultimately. Okay. Now, the final satisfaction rate, things are moved around on the slide for some reason, but the final satisfaction rate was, we were aiming for our staff to have a 10% improvement and that they would be satisfied with their tools. We wanted a 20% improvement as part of the rollout with all the devices and headsets and the technology and everything. We actually hit a 46% improvement when it came to productivity, and a 35% improvement on their tools when they did the much bigger engagement and as part of our survey. So it was a significant jump on the project. So what are the things that I can actually recommend as part of a CHAMPS program? 1, who is actively participating? And if they're not, kick them. If they aren't, then Cecilia, that was actually all surveys. So it was done by surveys, formal surveys. So who is, and plus also, sorry, some of the analysis in the back end, we could see some of the analysis, but the surveys was all based on what people found. It was the NPIs and that sort of thing. So who is actively participating in learning? Like, who are involved? And if they aren't, why aren't they? So I would often speak to them and go, is there problems? Can you not get in? Are you watching videos? You're not putting things into the CHAMPS platform. Who speaks most to the service desk and raising issues? Is it because they're really, really struggling? Is it because they're helping others in the business? Because I was asking them to help others to raise tickets if needs be and define whether it was a technological issue or not. So I would speak regularly to the help desk. I'd push out stories, not only of who is our champ, why they won for the month, or who are people across that would be mentors across the business, who are our evangelists across the business, for example. Who's attending sessions live, watching, recording? Is there any issues? I would regularly check in with the champs and see, are they struggling? Was there topics? Reach out to me, talk to me. Are you finding it too much, too little? I always would gauge the temperature. Okay. What was the temperature of both my champs and the business, and checking back in? And you don't necessarily need to do it with surveys all the time. You can just do it in a meeting with a poll at the end of a session, just a quick poll. Most people are happy to answer one or two questions along the way. Do the business actually know who your champs are? Now, that is a big challenge, because a lot of times we have people who are the yes people across the business. And I was very clear around my expectations of the champs, and that they needed to be the evangelists. They needed to be those people that were yes people. And a senior leader would regularly nominate someone going, we want them on our team. And I would go, no, I'm sorry, they're not champ material. They really struggle with the technology. They're not the type of people, and they're not turning up. So I was quite clear. Who the exit strategies, and know what those exit strategies are for people, and be really clear around those guides. Is there champ issues with the service desk, so that I could keep the communication going between the two? And where were the problems happening? Because they were the voice and the ears of the business, and you need to treat them as such and give them that value, and then reward them. And they would get the reward in terms of the chief executive and knowledge, and it would go out. They'd have the all hands meetings, and they would actually get recognized in the all hands. I'd made it get recognized as part of all hands meetings. If it's not working, get back together with everyone, bring them all together, review, ask, workshop, what are ways to be able to do it? What are the topics do you think? Get them to vote on topics for the business and things, because they're hearing what's going on in their teams. So talk to them and adjust.
I have really loved spending.
I'm going to come back and I'm going to repeat this. So this next page was at the very, very end of the program. So I have all my champs and the service desk and everyone together. And I'm going to repeat this.
I love spending time with you all. Please feel to reach out. Matt, you have a question. Hello, Matt. Oh, you want to say hello to me? Come say hello.
I do want to say hello, but no, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for us. Not only us as like the end users, but also personally from when I was on the service desk.
Thank you.
You've been absolutely wonderful, and you've changed everything for us in terms of the training and stuff. So I'm sure everyone's taken their own little snippet of, some of your words of wisdom and pearls there. So
thank you. We'll go not emotional.
Oh, no, don't cry, all right?
I know. I've really enjoyed, and I think it's becoming real now, so I have loved.
So that was at the very end of the session, and I was saying goodbye to all my champs and the help desk. So Matt was actually on the help desk, and he went to another role, but he was there for around about 3/4 of the program. So when he spoke up, and I asked his permission to actually play the recording, for the session, and I was saying goodbye after a year of the program. So at the end, I was like, oh, I'm getting all emotional saying goodbye, because I really I would say to my champs at the every I love my champs. It's so good that you're here. Come on, let's go have some fun and let's go play. Make it fun and help them to learn. Now, you can find a lot of information on how to be able to do this in terms of the champs programs and, stuff that's actually out there. Microsoft have got some great content on their adoption site. So you can go in there. They've got their champs calls that they actually run each month. So go and get yourself registered in terms of some of the resources and the champs and the education that's actually out there. I am going to be presenting at the Digital Workplace Conference over in New Zealand. I'm going to be doing this champs, session when I actually get over there. It's only 3.5 weeks away. I'm coming to spend 5 or 6 days beforehand having a look at the Northern Island as I do a bit of a drive around. So I'm looking forward to getting to see New Zealand, and then I'll be there. So if you want to meet me in person, feel free to come along. And ultimately, the true power of working in something like Microsoft 365 lies in changing the way people work. Okay, it's about trust. It's about, behavioral shifts. And that's actually about you guys. It's not about the technology. The technology is an enabler. But what we want to do is really shift from the people side of it. If you want to see the adoption library, it is in there. As I said, if you're rolling out Copilot or in it, there's a whole page on all things adoption for Copilot. Thank you so much for coming along. And is there any questions? I'm more than happy to answer some questions for you. What have we got? I haven't heard of it. Oh, it's just the link. Thank you so much for putting the champs session in, Gavin. Do we have any other questions? Anyone want to raise their hand or put them into chat? Things that they want to dive into, or things that I did around engagement, or there were so many parts to the program. Oh, thank you, Joan. You must come along to the Sydney meetups, or you watch them online. No questions? You're welcome, Claire. I'm pleased to see you enjoyed it. Thank you for the claps.
It was a great session, Kirsty. Thanks so much. And the presentation slides will be made available via our meetup group after the session, as well as the recording.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for being so positive. It was really great. I like your idea of actually getting rid of people, not just having people in a group. Yeah, that's really.